Something strange is happening in the economy right now, and it looks disturbingly familiar. In 1929, the signs were all there: booming markets, reckless debt, and a dangerous belief that the good times would never end. A century later, those same warning signs are flashing again, almost exactly the same way. Welcome to Empire Economics, where we uncover the hidden patterns behind every major financial shift. If you want to stay ahead of the next big crash, make sure you subscribe, like, and tell me in the comments whether you think we're living through history repeating itself. Because by the end of this video, you'll see why the ghost of 1929 might not just be a metaphor, it might be a warning. When most people think about economic crashes, they imagine dramatic headlines and chaotic trading floors. But the truth about financial collapse is far more subtle and dangerous than Hollywood would have you believe. The Great Depression didn't announce itself with sirens and flashing lights. It crept in through a series of warning signs that most people either ignored or simply didn't understand until it was too late. Today, nearly a century after the stock market crash of 1929, we're witnessing an eerie repetition of those same warning signs. The patterns are unmistakable if you know where to look. And the most unsettling part is that just like in 1929, the vast majority of people have no idea what's building beneath the surface of our economy. History has a way of echoing through time, and right now, that echo is getting louder. The question isn't whether we should pay attention to these patterns. The question is whether we'll recognize them before they reshape our financial landscape once again. Let me take you back to the late 1920s for a moment. America was experiencing what seemed like unstoppable prosperity. The stock market was soaring, consumer confidence was sky high, and everyone believed the good times would last forever. Sound familiar? Banks were making loans with reckless abandon. Speculation was driving asset prices to unsustainable levels, and debt was piling up at an alarming rate. But here's what most people don't realize about that era. The warning signs were everywhere. Commercial real estate was overvalued. Banks had become dangerously over-leveraged. Consumer debt had reached record levels. Wealth inequality was growing at an unprecedented pace, and perhaps most importantly, there was a widespread belief that the economic boom was permanent and that traditional rules of finance no longer applied. Fast forward to today, and the parallels are striking. We're living through an era of historically low interest rates that lasted for over a decade, creating conditions remarkably similar to the easy money environment of the 1920s. Asset prices have been inflated far beyond their fundamental values. Consumer debt has reached levels that would have been unthinkable just a few decades ago. And once again, there's a dangerous complacency in the air. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank in March 2023 provided us with a perfect case study of how quickly seemingly stable institutions can crumble. In just 48 hours, the 16th largest bank in America went from business as usual to complete collapse. The speed of this failure was unprecedented, accelerated by social media and digital banking in ways that weren't possible in 1929. But strip away the modern technology and the fundamental dynamics were identical to the bank runs of the 1930s. What made Silicon Valley Bank's collapse so concerning wasn't just its size or speed. It was the underlying vulnerabilities that the failure exposed throughout the entire banking system. Rising interest rates had devastated the value of long-term bonds that banks held as assets. A concentrated customer base created dangerous instability, and regulatory oversight had failed to catch problems that were hiding in plain sight. These weren't unique problems affecting just one bank. They were systemic issues that revealed cracks in the foundation of our entire financial system. Within days of Silicon Valley Bank's collapse, other regional banks began experiencing similar pressures. Signature Bank failed. First Republic Bank followed. Each collapse revealed the same underlying vulnerabilities that had brought down their predecessor. The Federal Reserve's response was swift and decisive, providing emergency lending facilities and coordinating with other regulators to prevent a complete systemic meltdown. But this response, while necessary, also highlighted just how fragile our banking system had become. The fact that such dramatic intervention was required to prevent widespread collapse should serve as a wake-up call about the stability we've taken for granted. Beyond the banking sector, other warning signs continue to multiply. Commercial real estate faces a looming crisis as office occupancy rates remain historically low in our post-pandemic world. Hundreds of billions of dollars in property loans are coming due, and with interest rates significantly higher than when these loans were originally made, refinancing has become a nightmare for property owners. Regional banks are particularly vulnerable to this commercial real estate crisis, with some institutions having as much as 18% of their balance sheets exposed to these types of loans. When defaults begin to cascade through this sector, the impact will be felt far beyond just the property markets. Consumer confidence indicators paint an equally concerning picture. Despite official statistics suggesting economic stability, ordinary Americans are expressing deep anxiety about their financial future. Recent surveys show that over 70% of Americans believe inflation will worsen over the next year. This isn't just pessimism. This is a fundamental loss of confidence in the economic system's ability to maintain stability. This erosion of confidence creates a self-reinforcing cycle that economists recognize from previous financial crises. When people lose faith in the system's stability, they begin making decisions that actually contribute to that instability. They pull money out of banks, reduce spending, and avoid investments. These individual rational responses collectively create the very problems people are trying to protect themselves from. The parallels to 1929 extend beyond just financial metrics into the realm of human psychology and social dynamics. Just as in the late 1920s, we're living through a period of extreme wealth inequality. Just as in that era, there's a widespread belief that technological innovation has fundamentally changed the rules of economics. And just as then, there's a dangerous complacency among both policymakers and the general public about the possibility of serious economic disruption. But here's where our story takes an important turn, because understanding these patterns isn't about predicting doom. It's about recognizing that economic cycles are a natural part of how financial systems operate. The critical difference between then and now lies not in the patterns themselves, but in our ability to recognize them before they reach their breaking point. The Great Depression caught an entire generation off guard because the warning signs weren't widely understood or discussed. Today, we have the benefit of historical perspective and economic research that can help us identify these cycles as they develop. What we're witnessing now is what economists call a debt supercycle. This is a long-term pattern where debt levels across an economy grow faster than the underlying productive capacity to service that debt. During the expansion phase, everything appears stable and prosperous. Asset prices rise, employment grows, and confidence builds. But underneath, the mathematical reality is building toward an inevitable correction. Consumer debt levels have reached staggering proportions. Credit card debt alone has surpassed $1.2 trillion, representing about 6% of America's total debt burden. More concerning than the absolute numbers is the trend in delinquencies. Serious delinquencies, defined as payments more than 90 days late, have doubled since early 2022. This isn't just a statistical curiosity. This is real families struggling to meet their financial obligations in an economy that official statistics describe as healthy. The housing market presents another layer of complexity to our current situation. Unlike the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008, today's housing challenges stem from different sources. Inventory shortages, construction bottlenecks, and demographic shifts have created conditions where housing costs consume an ever larger share of household income. When combined with elevated interest rates, this creates affordability challenges that echo the economic pressures ordinary families faced in the years leading up to the Depression. Corporate debt levels tell a similar story of vulnerability masked by surface prosperity. Companies have borrowed heavily during the years of low interest rates, using cheap money to fund operations, acquisitions, and stock buybacks. As these loans come due in an environment of higher borrowing costs, many businesses face refinancing challenges that could trigger a wave of defaults and restructurings. The international dimension adds another layer of complexity that wasn't present in 1929. Today's global financial system is far more interconnected than it was nearly a century ago. A banking crisis in one region can trigger liquidity problems halfway around the world within hours. Currency fluctuations and trade tensions create additional vulnerabilities that can amplify local economic problems into global disruptions. The ghost of 1929 isn't lurking in the shadows. It's walking among us in broad daylight, wearing modern clothes, and speaking the language of innovation and progress. The patterns are clear for those willing to see them. The vulnerabilities are real for those brave enough to acknowledge them. And the lessons of history remain as relevant today as they were nearly a century ago. Understanding these parallels doesn't mean accepting inevitability. It means recognizing that knowledge is the most powerful tool we have for navigating uncertain times. The families who survived the Great Depression weren't the ones who saw it coming and panicked. They were the ones who understood that economic storms, like natural ones, eventually pass. They prepared without despair, adapted without surrender, and emerged stronger because they refused to be caught completely off guard. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And right now, the rhythm is unmistakable. The question isn't whether you'll face economic turbulence in your lifetime. The question is whether you'll recognize the patterns that can help you navigate whatever comes next. If this perspective opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, hit subscribe. The past has more to teach us than we realize. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice.